The courtroom was full, but not with tension like you'd expect during a serious trial. Instead, it buzzed with smug laughter and quiet snickering from one side to side, where three white police officers sat looking way to relax for men just accused of serious crimes. Mike Reynolds leaned back in his chair like he was watching a game. Greg Carter whispered something that made Tom Willis laugh under his breath. These weren't nervous men. These were officers who knew the game, and more importantly, knew they'd already won it. For months, they had been under investigation. People had come forward with stories black citizens who said they'd been stopped for no reason, had force used on them without cause, or worse, had fake evidence planted just to make arrests stick. The list of complaints was long, ugly, and too familiar, but in the end, none of it seemed to matter. The judge tapped the gavel. Case dismissed. That was it. Just like that, it was over. Don Mike clapped Greg on the back. Another day, another win, he said with a smirk. Greg laughed. Man, they really thought they had us. Tom shook his head and grinned. They never learned. The courtroom didn't. Erupt in shock or outrage, just silence from the people, who had hoped for something different this time. From the back rows, a few people stood up and left, heads down. They'd seen this before. The ones with power walk free, and the ones without are told to keep waiting. And the three cops, they stood up like kings, ready to walk out and do it all again. Just as the three officers were getting ready to leave the courtroom, the back doors opened with a loud creak. Everyone turned to look. A tall black man stepped inside, wearing a dark suit that fit him sharp and clean. His shoes echoed as he walked, and the confidence in his stride made people sit up straighter. He didn't say a word, but his presence filled the room. He didn't need to raise his voice or flash a badge. Just being there was enough to shift the energy. The laughter stopped. The smirks faded. The judge cleared his throat and looked uneasy. Before we wrap up, he said, glancing at the man who had just walked in, I have an announcement. The room quieted. Everyone could tell this wasn't just a side note. As of today, the judge continued, this city has appointed a new chief of police. Please welcome Chief Jamal Brooks. All three officers froze. Mike's smile vanished. Greg's body stiffened. Tom's jaw clenched. That name Jamal Brooks had hit them like a slap. They knew him. He wasn't just some random pick. He was the same man they had once dragged out of his car during a fake stop. The one they mocked, humiliated, and locked up just to hit a quota. Back then, they laughed in his face. Now, he was standing at the front of the courtroom with a badge they couldn't ignore. Jamal looked right at them. Gentlemen, he said, calm and steady, I look forward to working with you. No anger, no shouting, just a look that told them everything had changed. The next morning felt different. Mike, Greg, and Tom walked into the precinct like men, heading toward something they didn't want to face. The swagger they usually carried was gone. No more inside jokes or loud talk, just quiet footsteps and tight jaws. Everyone in the building had heard the news. Chief Jamal Brooks was officially in charge, and he wasn't just a new face. He was the man those three had once treated like trash. Now he was the one wearing the badge with real power behind it. As they entered, other officers stood up straight and greeted Jamal with clear respect. He stood at the front of the room in full uniform, hands behind his back, calm but strong. His badge caught the light overhead. He didn't need to raise his voice, just standing there. He let everyone know the rules had changed. Reynolds, Carter, Willis. His voice cut through the silence. The three flinched when they heard their names. Jamal motioned for them to come forward. No one else moved. They slowly walked up, trying to look casual, but their nerves showed. Greg forced a smile. Chief Brooks, it's great to have you here. Jamal raised an eyebrow. Is it? Mike cleared his throat. Yeah, we're ready to serve under your leadership. Jamal didn't answer. Instead, he placed a thick folder on the table between them. When he opened it, their faces dropped. Inside were pages of reports, complaints, and files that were supposed to be gone. Things they thought had been buried, names, dates, pictures, all of it. You've used your badge for the wrong reasons for too long, Jamal said, voice sharp now. That ends today. The room stayed quiet as Jamal stood over the folder, not saying anything for a moment. Then he looked up at them, no anger in his face, just control, effective immediately. He said, you're all suspended. Internal investigation starts today. The words hit hard. Mike's mouth fell open. Suspended, he asked, as if he hadn't heard it right. Jamal gave a short nod. That's right. You won't wear this badge again unless you earn the right to. Greg's forehead was already wet with sweat. Tom looked like he was about to speak, but didn't. They could feel the eyes of the other officers behind them, some shocked, some quiet, and some, especially the younger ones, were watching with a look of relief, like someone had finally stepped in and said what needed to be said. For a long time, Jamal didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He just stood tall, like a leader should. This department doesn't exist to protect men who abuse their power. That stops now. Then he turned away. That was it. No debate, no warnings. The meeting ended right there. But the message stuck. By the end of the day, the news had already spread across the city. Articles popped up. Headlines ran. New police chief suspends officers on first day. People on the streets started talking. For the first time in a long while, it felt like something real was happening. This wasn't just a new name in charge. This was the start of something bigger, and the ones who thought they were untouchable, they were finally feeling the heat. Over the next 2 weeks, everything started to come out. The internal investigation wasn't for show, it was real, and it moved fast. Old reports were pulled from the system. Body cam footage that had somehow gone missing before was suddenly found. Victims who had been scared to speak up before now felt like maybe, just maybe, someone would finally listen, and they did speak. One by one, stories poured in: wrongful arrests, fake evidence, threats, stolen money. It was worse than anyone thought. The deeper they dug, the uglier it got. Officers who had stayed quiet for years finally came forward. Some admitted they had seen things but had been too afraid to challenge it. Now, with Jamal in charge, they felt like they could finally be honest. Everything the city had once ignored or swept under the rug was being laid out in the open. Jamal didn't hold press conferences for attention. He didn't post long speeches online. He just worked quietly, firmly, and without pause. His goal was clear: clean the department from the inside out. And the public noticed. People who had stopped trusting the system started paying attention again. News stations ran nightly updates. Social media lit up with clips of the investigation. Finally, people were saying, someone's doing something. And through it all, Mike, Greg, and Tom stayed quiet. No more smiles. No more jokes. Their names were now tied to shame, not power. The city that once looked the other way was now looking straight at them, and it wasn't backing down. A few weeks later, the same courtroom that once let the officers walk free was now packed again, but this time, they weren't sitting relaxed in the front row. They were standing in handcuffs. No laughter, no smiles. The crowd behind them was full reporters, former victims, and people who had been waiting years to see this day. The judge, no longer looking friendly or distracted, sat with a firm expression. The energy in the room had flipped completely. The prosecutor stood tall and clear. He read out each charge: solely misconduct, abuse of power, planting evidence, racial targeting, even stealing from evidence lockers. It went on and on. The 3 officers stood there pale and shaking. Mike looked like he was holding his breath. Greg kept wiping his hands on his pants. Tom didn't say a word. We have video. We have sworn statements. We have records. The prosecutor said. They didn't just break the rules. They destroyed lives. One of the reporters scribbled notes fast. A woman in the back wiped a tear from her face. She had once been arrested by one of those officers for something she didn't do. When the judge asked for their pleas, Mike mumbled not guilty. Greg muttered something about being framed, but no one cared. The jury left to decide and came back in just under an hour. The room stood still as the foreman read one word: guilty. That was it. The courtroom filled with clapping, some people crying, others hugging. The officers were led out in cuffs, no high fives this time. As they passed Jamal, Greg hissed, "You set us up." Jamal didn't flinch. "No," he said calmly. "You set yourselves up. I just let the truth speak." The doors shut behind them with a heavy echo, and just like that, it was over. The 3 men who once acted like they owned the room were now gone, taken away in chains. By the same system they thought would always protect them, people stayed, seated for a moment, taking it in. Some were crying quietly, others just sat still, like they couldn't believe they'd actually seen justice happen with their own eyes. Jamal didn't say much. He stood near the back of the courtroom, watching. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't bragged, hadn't made the story about himself. He just did what needed to be done. The same courtroom that once pushed him aside had become the place where things started to shift. Outside, The streets weren't loud with protests anymore. They were buzzing with something else, hope. The kind people didn't let themselves feel often. Jamal walked out of the building, head high but calm. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but he didn't stop for any of it. He didn't need to. What mattered had already happened. The system that used to protect bad cops was finally cracking. And this was just the beginning. Behind him, people watched him go. Some nodding, some wiping away tears. No speeches, no banners. Just one man who took a stand and meant it. Jamal Brooks wasn't finished, not even close.